Here's something nobody talks about when they remember Lucille Ball. Not the red hair, not the chocolate factory, not the Vitamita Vegamin routine that made 50 million Americans laugh until they cried. No, what nobody talks about is what happened on a Thursday afternoon in March 1988 on Stage 12 at Universal Studios. Lucy was 76 years old. She was filming a guest appearance on a variety special, and somewhere between the second and third take of a simple walk-and-talk scene, she felt something wrong in her chest. Not a little wrong. The kind of wrong that makes your left arm go numb. The kind of wrong that makes you see spots at the edges of your vision. And here's the thing about Lucille Ball, the thing that everyone who ever worked with her understood down to their bones. She didn't stop. She didn't call for a medic. She didn't ask for a chair. She didn't even take a breath that anyone could see. She finished the take. She smiled at the director. And then she turned to her makeup artist, a 34-year-old woman named Diane Heller, who had been doing Lucy's face for 6 years, and said 5 words, "Just some reflux, sweetheart, continue." 12 hours later, Lucille Ball was in the cardiac unit at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And the next morning, against every doctor's order, against every piece of common sense, she was back on that stage, hitting her marks like nothing had happened. This is that story. The story of the day Lucille Ball's heart tried to kill her, and the story of why she wouldn't let it. Not yet, not on someone else's schedule, and certainly not in front of a camera. Because if you want to understand who Lucille Ball really was, you can't just watch her on screen. You have to understand what she was willing to die for. To understand what happened on that Thursday in 1988, you need to understand what Lucille Ball had already survived. By the time she walked onto that Universal soundstage, Lucy had been in show business for 55 years. 55 years! Most people don't live that long, let alone work that long in an industry designed to chew you up and spit you out before you hit 40. She'd started as a chorus girl in 1933, getting fired from Broadway shows because directors said she didn't have the spark. She'd done B-movies at RKO where she was literally called Queen of the Bees, and that wasn't a compliment. She'd been told by studio executives to her face that she was too old for leading roles when she was 32 years old. And then, against every odd, against every piece of conventional Hollywood wisdom, she'd become the most successful woman in television history. I Love Lucy ran for 6 seasons and never once dropped out of the top 3 in ratings. Not once. When little Ricky was born on the show, the same night Lucy gave birth to Desi Jr. in real life, more Americans watched that episode than watched Eisenhower's inauguration the next day. Think about that. More people cared about Lucy having a baby than about who was running the country. But here's what the history books don't tell you. By 1988, all of that was ancient history. Desi had been dead for 2 years. The love of her life, the man she'd fought CBS to keep, the man who'd cheated on her and broken her heart and still somehow remained the only person who truly understood her, gone. A quiet death from lung cancer in a hospital room in Del Mar, California. Lucy had called him the week before he died. According to a nurse who was in the room, they talked for almost an hour. Nobody knows what they said. But when Desilu hung up the phone, he was crying. After Desi died, something changed in Lucy. The people around her saw it. Her longtime assistant, a no-nonsense former studio secretary named Patricia Collins, later said she was still Lucy. She still showed up, but there was this tiredness in her eyes that wasn't there before, like part of her had already checked out. But Lucille Ball didn't know how to stop working. She physically did not know how. When people asked her why she kept taking jobs in her 70s, she had a standard answer. What else am I going to do? Sit around and wait to die? She wasn't joking. She genuinely didn't understand the concept of retirement. To Lucy, retirement was what happened to other people, lesser people. People who didn't understand that the work was the only thing keeping you alive. So when ABC approached her in early 1988 about appearing in a variety special celebrating classic television, she said yes without hesitation. Her agent, a cautious man named Howard Rosenman, suggested maybe she should take it easy, maybe just do a satellite interview from home. Lucy's response, according to Rosenman, "I'm not dead yet. I can still hit a mark." The special was called A Celebration of Television's Golden Age. It was scheduled to tape over 3 days in March 1988. Lucy was set to appear on the second day, doing a short comedy bit with several other classic TV stars, and then participating in a panel discussion about the early days of television. Simple stuff, easy work. The kind of thing Lucy could have done in her sleep 20 years ago. But Lucy in 1988 was not Lucy in 1968. Her health had been quietly deteriorating for years. She'd had multiple surgeries. Her energy wasn't what it used to be, and she developed a habit, one she hid from almost everyone, of taking short breaks during the day to sit in her dressing room with the lights off, just breathing, gathering herself for the next scene. A production assistant named Michael Torres, 28 years old and fresh out of UCLA's film program, was assigned to Lucy for the taping. His job was simple: make sure Miss Ball had everything she needed and make sure she was on set when she was supposed to be. Torres later remembered his first meeting with Lucy vividly. She walked in and she was smaller than I expected. You see her on TV your whole life, she seems larger than life. But in person, she was this slim, very elegant older woman, beautiful bone structure, and these incredible blue eyes that just locked onto you, like she was seeing right through you. He also remembered something else, something that at the time he didn't think much about. She was breathing a little heavy, just a little, like she'd walked up a flight of stairs. But we were on the ground floor. There were no stairs. Torres didn't say anything. You didn't question Lucille Ball. You just did your job and stayed out of her way. But looking back, he always wondered, was that the first sign? Was her heart already starting to give out, even before the cameras rolled? The morning of Thursday, March 17th, 1988, started like any other production day. Call time was 7 a.m. Lucy arrived at 6:45 because Lucille Ball did not arrive on time. She arrived early. 15 minutes early, minimum. It was a rule she'd followed since the I Love Lucy days, and she wasn't about to change it now. Diane Heller, her makeup artist, was already waiting in the dressing room. The two women had developed a comfortable routine over the years. Lucy would sit in the chair, close her eyes, and let Diane work while they talked about nothing in particular. The weather, what was on TV last night, gossip about people they both knew. But that morning, something was different. She was quiet, Diane remembered. Usually Lucy talked my ear off. She had opinions about everything. But that morning, she just sat there with her eyes closed. And when I asked her if she was okay, she just said, "Tired, sweetheart. Just tired." Diane didn't push. You learn not to push with Lucy. If she wanted to tell you something, she'd tell you. If she didn't, no amount of asking would change her mind. The first few hours of taping went smoothly. Lucy did her panel segment, sitting with Bob Hope and Milton Berle and a few other veterans of television's early years. She was charming, she was funny, she hit all her marks. The control room was happy. During a break around 11:30, Lucy retreated to her dressing room. Patricia Collins, her assistant, brought her a cup of tea and a small plate of crackers. She didn't touch the crackers, Patricia later said. She just held the tea in both hands, like she was warming herself. And I remember thinking, it's not cold in here. It's a soundstage in Los Angeles in March. Why does she look like she's freezing? Patricia asked if she wanted to rest. Lucy shook her head. We have 3 more setups before lunch. I'll rest when I'm dead. It was the kind of thing Lucy said all the time. A joke. A tough, broad line from a woman who'd built her career on being tougher than everyone else in the room. But Patricia didn't laugh. Something about the way Lucy said it, flat without her usual sparkle, made it feel less like a joke and more like a prediction. The comedy bit was scheduled for right after lunch. It was a simple premise. Lucy and 2 other actors would recreate a classic vaudeville routine, with Lucy playing the straight woman who keeps getting interrupted. Physical comedy, some pratfalls, nothing she hadn't done 1,000 times before. The first take went fine. Not great, but fine. The director, a veteran named Howard Morris, who had worked with Lucy years before on The Lucy Show, asked for another pass. Lucy, can we get a little more energy on the cross? You're coming in a bit flat. Lucy nodded. You got it, Howard. She walked back to her mark. The cameras reset. The assistant director called for quiet on the set. And then Michael Torres, watching from behind camera 2, saw something that made his stomach drop. Lucy swayed. Just a little. Just for a second. Like she'd lost her balance. But Lucille Ball didn't lose her balance. Lucille Ball had the physical control of a trained dancer. She didn't sway, she didn't stumble, she didn't wobble. Torres started to move forward, but before he could say anything, Lucy steadied herself. She took a breath, a careful breath, the kind you take when you're trying not to show pain, and nodded at the director. Ready when you are, Howard? They rolled. Lucy crossed to her mark. She delivered her first line perfectly. And then Right in the middle of her second line, she stopped. Not a dramatic stop, not a collapse. She just paused. Her right hand came up to her chest. Not clutching, not grabbing, just resting there like she was checking for something. The camera kept rolling. Nobody called cut because nobody was sure what was happening. 3 seconds passed. Then 5. Then Lucy's hand dropped. She took another careful breath and she finished her line like nothing had happened. Cut! Howard Morris stepped out from behind the monitor. Lucy, you okay? We can take 5 if you need. I'm fine, Howard. Lucy's voice was steady, professional. The same voice she'd used to calm nervous guest stars and reassure anxious network executives for 40 years. Just lost my place for a second. Let's go again. They went again. And this time, Lucy nailed it. Perfect timing, perfect energy, even a little ad-lib that made the crew laugh. But Michael Torres wasn't watching the performance. He was watching Lucy's face between takes, and what he saw scared him. She was pale. Not TV pale, not needs more makeup pale. Pale like someone who was fighting to stay conscious. During the next setup change, Torres approached Diane Heller at the edge of the set. Is Miss Ball okay? She looks... She's fine, Diane said quickly. Too quickly. She's just tired. It's a long day. Torres didn't believe her. But he also knew his place. He was a 28-year-old production assistant. Lucille Ball was a living legend. You didn't second-guess a living legend. The rest of the afternoon was a masterclass in denial. Lucy kept working. She did 3 more setups, each one requiring physical comedy that would have tired out someone half her age. She smiled. She joked with the crew. She autographed a photo for a young extra who nervously asked for one. But the people who knew her, Diane, Patricia, the handful of crew members who'd worked with her before, they could see it. Something was wrong. At around 4:15, during a lighting adjustment, Lucy walked off set toward the restroom. Patricia followed her. When they were alone in the hallway, away from cameras and crew, Lucy leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Miss Ball, don't, Lucy said quietly. Just give me a minute. Patricia stood there helpless, watching the most famous woman in television history press her hand against her chest and breathe in shallow, careful breaths. 30 seconds passed, maybe 40. Then Lucy opened her eyes. She straightened her spine. She smoothed her hair. How do I look? Patricia wanted to say, you look like you need a hospital. You look like you're in pain. You look like something is seriously wrong and you need to stop pretending everything is fine. Instead, she said, you look beautiful, Miss Ball. Lucy smiled, a small, tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. Good. Let's finish this. They finished at 6:30. Wrap was called. The crew applauded, because that's what you did when you wrapped a day of shooting. Lucy acknowledged the applause with a small wave and walked toward her dressing room. She made it about 15 feet before she grabbed the back of a director's chair to steady herself. Diane was there in an instant. Lucy, I'm fine. The words were automatic now. A reflex. I just need to sit down. They got her to the dressing room. Diane closed the door. Lucy sat in the makeup chair, the same chair she'd sat in that morning, when everything still seemed normal, and finally let her face show what she was feeling. Pain, fear, and something else. Something that looked almost like anger. It's my chest, she said quietly. It's been hurting since, I don't know, lunchtime. Maybe before. We need to call a doctor. No doctors. Lucy's voice was sharp. Not here. Not with 50 people outside who'll sell the story to the tabloids before I'm in the ambulance. Diane wanted to argue, but she'd known Lucy for 6 years. She knew that tone. It wasn't a request, it was an order. What do you want me to do? Lucy was quiet for a moment. Then she said, call my driver. Tell him to bring the car around to the back entrance. The service entrance, not the main one. And tell Patricia to get my coat. What about the wrap party? They're expecting you. Tell them I'm tired. Lucy looked at her reflection in the mirror. Even in pain, even scared, she was still calculating, still managing her image. Tell them I send my love, and I'll see everyone tomorrow. Tomorrow. She was already planning to come back tomorrow. Diane stared at her. Lucy, you need to see a doctor. I'll see a doctor. At home, my doctor. Not some studio physician who will leak my records to Entertainment Tonight. She paused. Diane, I've been in this business since before you were born. I know how it works. The second they think you're sick, you're finished. You're not a star anymore, you're a tragedy. And I'm not ready to be a tragedy yet. The car came. They got Lucy out through the service entrance without anyone seeing. Diane sat with her in the back seat, holding her hand as Lucy's longtime driver, a quiet man named Eduardo, who'd been driving her for 15 years, navigated through LA traffic toward her home in Beverly Hills. Halfway there, Lucy said, "It's getting worse." Eduardo didn't need to be told twice. He took the next exit and headed for Cedars-Sinai. By the time they arrived, Lucy's blood pressure was dangerously high, and she was having trouble catching her breath. The ER team took one look at her and rushed her to the cardiac unit. The diagnosis came within hours. She'd had a minor heart attack. Not the massive, instantly fatal kind, but bad enough. Bad enough that it should have put her flat on her back the moment it happened. Bad enough that continuing to work for another 4 hours afterward was, in the words of one attending physician, medically remarkable and incredibly stupid. Lucy stayed at Cedars-Sinai overnight. The hospital, understanding who their patient was, kept her name off every public record. Her room was registered under a false name. Louise Burton, the name of a character she'd played in a movie nobody remembered. Patricia sat with her through the night. Around 3 a.m., when the hospital was quiet, Lucy opened her eyes and looked at her assistant. "I need to call Howard," she said. "The director. Tell him I'll be there in the morning." Patricia thought she'd misheard. "Miss Ball, you just had a heart attack. You're not going anywhere." "Patricia." Lucy's voice was weak but absolutely certain. "I have a contract. I committed to 3 days. I did 1 day. That's 2 more days I owe them. They'll understand. They'll understand that Lucille Ball couldn't finish the job." For a moment, something fierce flickered in Lucy's eyes. The same fierce determination that had carried her through decades of rejection and heartbreak and impossible odds. "I've never missed a day of work because I was sick. Not once in 55 years. I'm not starting now." Patricia didn't sleep that night. Neither did Lucy. At 6 a.m., against the explicit orders of her cardiologist, Lucille Ball checked herself out of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Eduardo drove her home. She showered, changed clothes, and had Diane come over to do her makeup. At 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, as always, Lucille Ball walked back onto stage 12 at Universal Studios. She told no one what had happened. Not the director, not the producers, not the network executives who came by to shake her hand and tell her what an honor it was. As far as anyone knew, she'd just been tired the day before and had gone home early to rest. She worked 2 more days. She finished the special. She hit every mark and delivered every line. And then she went home and collapsed. The weeks after that taping were quiet ones for Lucille Ball. She didn't make any public appearances. She didn't take any meetings. She stayed in her Beverly Hills home, surrounded by a small circle of people she trusted. Patricia, Diane, her children Lucy and Desi Jr., and a rotating team of nurses and doctors who monitored her condition around the clock. The heart attack had done more damage than anyone initially realized. Her cardiac function was compromised. Her doctors told her in no uncertain terms that she needed to slow down. No more 18-hour production days. No more physical comedy. No more pretending she was still the tireless performer she'd been in her 40s. Lucy listened to all of this. She nodded in the right places. She promised to take it easy. And then, as soon as the doctors left, she asked Patricia to start going through her mail to see what offers had come in. She couldn't stop. Lucy Arnaz later said in an interview, "That's the thing people don't understand about my mother. Work wasn't what she did. It was who she was. Taking that away from her would have been like, I don't know, like taking away her oxygen." But the industry was already moving on. The offers that came in after the 1988 special were fewer than before and smaller. Guest spots on sitcoms she'd never heard of, cameos in movies that would go straight to video, voice work for animated features that felt beneath her dignity. Lucy turned most of them down, not because she was being precious about her legacy, but because she knew in that ruthlessly practical way she'd always known things about Hollywood that those jobs would diminish her, would turn her into a nostalgia act, a curiosity, a whatever happened to story in the entertainment pages. If she was going to work, she was going to work on her terms, or not at all. There was one more project, though, one more chance. In early 1989, ABC approached her about hosting the Academy Awards ceremony. Not the whole show. She'd share duties with several other Hollywood legends, but she'd have a significant role introducing categories and doing a short comedy bit that the writers were developing specifically for her. Lucy said yes immediately. The taping was scheduled for March 29, 1989, almost exactly 1 year after the heart attack no one knew about. Lucy prepared for it the way she'd always prepared for performances, obsessively, meticulously, going over every line and every movement until it was second nature. But her body wasn't cooperating. The rehearsals exhausted her in ways they never had before. She had trouble remembering lines she'd rehearsed a dozen times. Her timing, her legendary, impeccable timing, was just slightly off, just enough for her to notice even if the audience didn't. On the night of the ceremony, Lucille Ball walked onto the stage of the Shrine Auditorium to a standing ovation. The audience, actors, directors, producers, everyone who mattered in Hollywood rose to their feet and applauded for what felt like an eternity. She stood there in a stunning blue gown, her red hair perfect, her posture elegant, accepting the tribute with a grace that belied everything her body was putting her through. And then she did something nobody expected. She started to cry. Not sobbing, not losing control, just quiet tears running down her face as she looked out at the crowd of people who had stood for her, who remembered what she'd meant to them, who understood that they were watching living history. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was steady despite the tears. "Thank you all very much." It wasn't much, just 4 words. But the way she said them, with 55 years of work and sacrifice and triumph behind them, made them feel like a final statement. 26 days later, on April 26, 1989, Lucille Ball died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The cause was an acute aortic aneurysm. She was 77 years old. The woman who had never missed a day of work had finally run out of days. Here's what I think about when I think about that day on stage 12 in 1988. I think about a 76-year-old woman with chest pain so severe she could barely stand upright, who somehow finished 4 more hours of physical comedy because she'd made a commitment. I think about the look in her eyes when she told Diane that she wasn't ready to be a tragedy yet. And I think about what it costs, what it really costs, to be the hardest working person in the room for 55 years. We like to celebrate that kind of dedication. We call it legendary work ethic and uncompromising professionalism. We tell stories about it at awards ceremonies and write it into obituaries and hold it up as an example for the next generation. But there's another way to look at it. A way that might be closer to the truth. Lucille Ball couldn't stop working because she didn't know how to exist without work. The camera wasn't just her job, it was her identity, her worth. The only proof she had that the little girl from Jamestown, New York, who'd been shuffled from relative to relative and told she'd never amount to anything, had actually made something of herself. Take away the camera and what was left? A widow in a big house. A woman whose greatest love had died 2 years earlier. Someone who'd outlived most of her contemporaries and watched the industry she'd conquered move on to younger, newer faces. Work was all she had, so she kept working, even when her heart was literally telling her to stop. Michael Torres, the production assistant who saw her sway on set that day, went on to have a long career in television. He worked on dozens of shows, met hundreds of celebrities, saw every kind of behavior from every kind of star. But he never forgot Lucille Ball. "I've thought about it a lot over the years," he said in a 2015 interview for a documentary about classic TV. "What I saw that day, a woman having a heart attack, and I really believe that's what it was. And just refusing to acknowledge it, refusing to let it stop her." He paused. Was it brave? I don't know. Maybe it was brave. Or maybe it was something else. Maybe it was the saddest thing I ever saw. A woman who couldn't let herself be human for 1 minute because she was too afraid of what would happen if she did. There's a story they tell about Lucy's final day in the hospital. It may be true, it may be one of those apocryphal Hollywood legends that gets polished smoother with every telling. According to this story, a young nurse was adjusting Lucy's IV when Lucy suddenly opened her eyes and looked at her. "What time is it?" Lucy asked. The nurse told her it was almost 7 in the morning. Lucy nodded slightly. "Good," she said. "Call time." Then she closed her eyes and never opened them again. I don't know if that story is true, but I know this. If Lucille Ball had been able to choose her last words, those would have been perfect. Call time. The one phrase that had structured her entire life. The one commitment she'd never broken. The clock she'd organized every morning around for 55 years. In the end, Lucille Ball didn't die of a heart attack or an aneurysm or any other medical term. She died because she finally ran out of takes. The director called rap for the last time, and even Lucille Ball, even the woman who'd worked through a heart attack, through a failing marriage, through every obstacle Hollywood threw at her, couldn't argue with that. The show at last had ended. But here's the thing about Lucille Ball. The work she did, the shows she made, the moments she gave us, those don't end. They keep playing on television screens and streaming services and phone screens around the world, making new generations laugh at the chocolate factory and the Vitamita Vegamin routine and all the other physical comedy genius she left behind. She wanted to be remembered as a professional, someone who always showed up, always hit her marks, always gave everything she had. Well, Miss Ball, mission accomplished. You showed up right until the very end. Even when your heart was telling you to stop, you showed up. And 60 years from now, when people are watching those old black and white episodes and laughing at Lucy Ricardo's antics, they won't know about the day you worked through a heart attack. But you'll know. Somewhere, somehow, you'll know. And I think that would make you smile.